And our second reading continues in Genesis chapter 33, selected verses. Listen once again to the word of the Lord. Jacob looked up, and there was Esau, coming with his 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two female servants. He put the female servants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. He himself went on ahead and bowed to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Esau asked, "What's the meaning of all these flocks and herds I met? To find favor in your eyes, my lord," he said. But Esau said, "I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." "No, please," said Jacob. "If I have found favor in your eyes, accept this gift from me. For to see your face is like seeing the face of God. Now that you have received me favorably, please accept the present that was brought to you, for God has been gracious to me, and I have all I need." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Some of you know that the ministry is a second career for me. I know I'm young to already be on a second career, but it's the truth. My first career was in digital marketing. I started my professional life at an agency working with brands like Patron Tequila and Southwest Airlines and Citibank and Microsoft. I cut my teeth doing anything and everything my clients needed. Social media, web design, digital advertising, video production. Sometimes I had to work long hours, and sometimes these long hours paid off. I worked for a handful of agencies until I found myself in a corporate position. And I slowly worked my way up. But here's the thing. The deeper I got into my field, the more vacuous my life became. The more promotions I received, the more money I made, the more control I had over my own work, the less satisfied I was. I was striving to make a name for myself, but finding my life to be more and more empty. About 3 years into my first career, shortly after Allie and I got married, we were driving to a church Christmas party. Allie and I were deeply involved in planting a new church in Austin, Texas, and we were invited to the staff Christmas party. We spent so much time volunteering for this church that we were basically on staff. And so on our way to the party, I said something that I had fallen into the habit of saying. I said something like, "If I ever go to seminary, I'd love to learn about whatever. If I ever go to seminary, I want to whatever." I had come to hate my real job so much that graduate school started to seem like a fantasy. Higher education was my daydream escape. And apparently, I had started to say this phrase so much that Allie took notice. And on that particular day, she cut me off mid-sentence and said, "I never want to hear you talk about seminary again. Either go or stop talking about it." A month later, I had applied to 3 different schools. 3 months later, I had been accepted with great scholarships. And 8 months later, we were in a moving van driving cross-country with all our worldly possessions in tow. Our life changed dramatically in less than a year. 3 years of struggling to make a name for myself and establish a career were gone. A new chapter had begun. And the new chapter, in contrast to the old, was effortless. From the moment I made the decision to attend seminary, it was like everything fell into place. I submitted myself to the process, and God did the rest. I think there are 2 kinds of blessings that God gives us. There are two ways of engaging God in our work and worship. The first kind of blessing is the kind we struggle for. It's the blessing that comes only as the result of years of prayer. Blessing that is earned through blood and sweat and tears. Blessing that God gives us when we remain faithful in the middle of a storm. The second kind of blessing God gives us, though, is effortless. It happens when we throw our hands up and say, God, whatever you want. I'm not going to try anymore. I'm not going to work anymore. It's the kind of blessing that surprises us because it runs so contrary to the ways of the world. We often imagine God works the same way the world works. If we just do enough good, surely God will bless us. Well, we read enough of Genesis to know that that's not how God works. So this second kind of blessing is actually what we encounter more of in Scripture. It's the blessing born of God's grace. God blesses us because He is the kind of God who blesses His children just because He loves them, not because they have earned it. And our two readings this morning illustrate Jacob's experience with these two kinds of blessings. The first comes through a very bizarre encounter with God, and it requires some context, so allow me to refresh your memory on Jacob's story so far. We last looked at Jacob and Esau's struggle over their father Isaac's blessing. This was 2 weeks ago. Jacob disguises himself as his older brother and steals the blessing from Esau. And this causes Esau to fly into a murderous rage. Jacob learns of this and flees. We read that Jacob spends 20 years in exile from his family and homeland. And during this time, he marries his two wives, Leah and Rachel. We also read that God blesses him with immense wealth. But eventually, the time comes for him to return and face the music with his brother Esau. Now, we have no knowledge of how Esau spent this time. We don't know how his feelings toward Jacob changed. So we must assume that he has been harboring the same rage that sent Jacob packing. In chapter 32, we find Jacob preparing his people and animals for the uncertain reunion with his brother. And tucked within this greater context, we discover one of the most peculiar stories in all of Scripture. It's the night before Jacob will see his brother Esau for the first time in 20 years. We read, that night, Jacob got up and took his two wives, his two female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled the man. If this wrestling match with a stranger seems odd to you, it's because it's odd. A lot of ink has been spilled trying to explain what the meaning behind this passage is. And what is clear to me is that this part of our story is not meant to advance the plot on any sort of logistical or practical level. Meaning, we're not learning more about the context of the story or the movements of its characters. Instead, this story within the greater story is meant to tell us something more abstract. It is the fight that comes before the battle. The wrestling match with a stranger before the fight with the brother. Jacob is isolated from his family to spend time alone with the stranger before he can be reunited with his family by marriage and by blood. All this to say, we can only make sense of this strange passage if we put it in conversation with the larger narrative. Jacob enters his tent to find a stranger, and there they begin to wrestle all night. At some point, the stranger realizes that Jacob has the upper hand and breaks his hip. Even then, The stranger knows he will lose the fight. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." Now here's the significance of that particular line. In the ancient Near East, they believed that seeing the face of God meant you would instantly die. So according to this logic, Jacob can wrestle the stranger all night so long as he doesn't see his face. But if the sun rises and reveals his face, the face of God, Jacob will immediately die. Well, God doesn't want to kill Jacob, so he asks to end the wrestling match. But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. We should not miss what God is doing in this moment. Of course, he knows Jacob's name. He is asking for more than his name. He is asking Jacob to confront his identity. This is lost on us in the English, but if we were reading it in the Hebrew, we'd see that Jacob's name literally means heel grabber, which we recall from reading about his weird birth story. Scripture says that Jacob and Esau wrestled even in the womb. And Esau was born first, but followed by his brother Jacob, who held